Hovercraft mode, dude. It's hovercraft, dude. It's like a hovercraft mode, dude. Sick. Floating, dude. Welcome back. The last episode you guys saw was Off-Road Expo. We're back in the studio, or the cave. Pretty pressed on Eric's stuff. I've been working on the exotic as well as Vivian and the Truggy. Myself, I've been working on the exotic. The Truggy and Vivian have both been worked on, but really the Vivian program is what's hot right now. I used to hate when people would say that, like on structural steel, you'd be like, we got some hot jobs here, we got really hot jobs coming up. This one's hot, man, you gotta get on that. So let's redo that. We have a deadline with Vivian that we're shooting for. As far as what that deadline is, that's testing with Keith on the 26th. It was the 27th, but it's the 26th now. So that means going to Barstow with the truck with bench valve on the shocks, having all the systems running, no paint, no powder coat, a lot of panels not finalized, just raw dog, and ready for Eric to go to Glamis the following weekend for Halloween. That's a doable thing for us. When did we start this stuff? So I usually use the whiteboards for myself. It's very helpful to use the whiteboards. I've learned that from a couple people, and I've talked about it before, but even just writing stuff down, not like typing it on my phone for like in a notes kind of application, but just writing it does something for me that really helps process. On top of that, Colin and I kind of started stuff, and I did kind of like, I had this categorized in needs and things to wrap up. And then I did work scheduling, so we'd get a couple blocks of days going as far as who needs to be doing what we expect them to be getting accomplished per day. And then adjusting the next set of blocks for any kind of stuff that didn't get done to kind of filter that into the next part of the schedule. And then parts orders, plumbing, and stuff that needs to be sent out in service. Now, all of my things that are crossed out here are things that are done. We're over halfway. Yeah, it's over halfway. The plumbing, Alex, we're doing all the plumbing in-house. Alex has taken it upon himself to kind of be the guy to do that stuff, and he's doing good at it. Again, these things are just like everything else. You have to learn. There's design that's put into them. There's functionality, serviceability, all that stuff goes with the plumbing aspect too. And there's no reason to not take that stuff on and learn from it along the way. So we're at a point here where we can do that. And we did the 1400 truck and some miscellaneous stuff, brake lines, handbrake lines, trans cooler lines, things like that. So now we're at a spot here where we're gonna put all that into Eric's truck, Vivian. But on top of that, another thing too, color coding. So I, would give each of us, there's 3 of us on this thing doing various things, and each person has a color code. You'll see like the green, blue, the red, and that's for each person to kind of delegate the work. Then I can go through and say, okay, well, here's all this stuff that we have to do. Who's going to be efficient and get this stuff done? What's the specialty here? And kind of move this stuff around like a Tetris game. And the way this has worked has been amazing. So I want to just do that with every single project, period, from here on out. And now, of course, well, why didn't you do it? You should do it from the start. Because I learned things the hard way. That's how my life is. So this is just what it took for me to get to this point. And then I can take this, and then we can start putting it into the computer. Joey can start processing all this into the jobs. Then we can spread this thing out into weeks. Then we can spread it out into months and the years. And then our whole every job is like a curriculum, and everything can get completed like that. Now, some of this stuff, like the plumbing, that is stuff I haven't done enough of or had guys do enough of in the shop to know like the hours and the time. So we have to navigate that stuff based on experience right now. And obviously we're going to get better and faster at it. But on top of that, like I don't know my timelines on that stuff yet because it's just not tight enough yet. So we can kind of just take that in, and then I'm gonna go over to the truck. I made a cut list of stuff that we've been working on and doing, and you can kind of see where Vivian's at right now, and we go from there. Sometimes when we're pressing on things, especially for Colin and efficiency, organizing the shop pertaining to what's going on is huge because we don't have a big studio. We have a small space, we make it work. There's a lot of cars in here, and right now there's a lot of dudes in here too. So just having the spot be more efficient and work aroundable. We knew there's a crunch here, so we're like, okay, we know what's gonna be worked on in the next couple weeks. Let's prioritize some things, do that. That's why Vivian's like this. The truggy over here that we'll cover is kind of doing the same thing. So we have a good team of people. I've talked about it briefly, and I don't know if I shared it with you guys on the last episodes, but there's been some big changes in my life like the last couple months. And just really pressing on being a better person and a partner and a father and a business owner and all kinds of stuff. And I've been making an effort. And it's showing in different ways, where one of the ways is my like circle of people and the, like, I guess my family or my small family and friends are like wholesome and amazing, and I've never felt it like this in my life, where I have a really good group and a network, and that's so important, I think, on like success and just maintaining a quality of life, to let you push and push and push. And that's the thing. I think getting comfortable is always not a good thing. I like to be uncomfortable, so it keeps you progressing and it keeps your creativity up. I've heard that comfort is the killer of creativity. But on that note, what I was getting at is I have like also several guys working for me right now, and I've kind of molded a team together, and it feels like we're like a team that functions together in a positive way. It's not just like guys working in a shop. There's like a flow to it, like a yin and a yang, that is really, really awesome. And I'm kind of, it's sealed right now, and I'm good, and I'm just gonna, hopefully we all work like we keep doing this, and we just get better and better with everything we're doing with each other. So, slick tangent right there. Anyways, this is her, she's stripped down. I wanna grab my list and go over things, because I know, like, even at the Off-Road Expo, talked about a couple things, but really, like, I think it was more of just covering that we're there and not so much like all of the detail of the vehicles. The issue here is there's a lot more of a truck complete than what it looks like, and I think we did that last time too. It was kind of torn down. It's fine. One of the bigger things is this thing went from, so Off-Road Expo, Saturday, Sunday, came to the shop Monday. We mounted all the cyclone tabs. That was one of like the last things we had to do to get it up to Tanner with Independence Electric. Tanner is, he used to work for Disney in the Imagineering department. He was an electrical engineer there. He's got a good brain on him, and he did all the harness. He did it in about a week, which is pretty impressive. Full harness front to rear. Took the engine harness that was in here and just kind of cleaned it up, trimmed all the fat out of it, and now there's like cannon plugs going into the firewall on the front. So we have like 1 harness, 2 harness, 3 harnesses, which is pretty typical for like a motorsports vehicle like this. Monday, before it went, we had to mount cyclones, KC cyclone lights, which are essentially like a rock light or a dome light or underglow. You know, that's the fire way. 28 to 32 of those on this thing. I don't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere 20. Joey's all, or like this. But yeah, there's a lot, and it's kind of cool. They're all in like special locations. Serviceability, obviously, like thinking about, okay, checking valve covers at night. I mean, obviously you can use a flashlight and things, but a lot of like making sure all of the running gear is visible. All the belt system, like if you needed to change a belt or something, that's all lit up. The areas where the drivetrain is under there lights up. The footwells are lit. All the cabin obviously is lit. Then I got some style points with where the mesh was in the back. You know, like there's obviously venting. There's a lot of extraction and intake of like mesh openings and all the panel work. So all that stuff is internally lit, like backlit almost, just for a vibe. And there's obviously stuff facing down on the running gear in the back. So there's wiring going throughout here. Obviously you can see just traces of the harness. It's all like proper stuff and all Raycam and just all good stuff. I don't know if I said that right, so please just judge me and criticize me and we're all good. Raycam, whatever, fine. So let me kind of read this and then we'll dice this thing up. Front brakes, finished light bar, intake tubes, filters, finished fuel tank, fuel filler, wiring, shocks out to Keith, weight, bedside mounts, spare outrigger mounts, cab fender mounts, harness bar, cab tie-ins, polished exhaust. And then what we're gonna also talk about is kind of where we're at with this and what we're doing right now. So let's do that. One of the things we needed to address was the filter system. The original filter was just right front center. Remember this, the Tundra version was rear mount radiator, which on like a separate basis is very exciting to not have it be rear mount just because the cooling issues were extravagant with that thing. With that, there's some packaging here that needed to happen. We thought about just running one tube with like it already ran a traditional like a cone style filter, not like a big UMP tractor filter. There's arguments on pros and cons for both of those. Anyways, we were gonna run one small one on the passenger side down here and have it kind of like tucked, almost like dipping through the upper A-arm and by the bumper, and it didn't make sense to have it like that, especially like just didn't make sense. So what you see here works really well, and it's also like it's built off of form. So this kind of shape and design, this is all tailored to the upper arm at compression. So when this guy goes full compression into the bump zone, it's almost parallel with the intake tube. So we got like some good style points off this thing, but really based off of functionality. Running two filters as well, and getting the filters away from the hot air, you know, coming from the pull fans on the radiator. And also, like, we thought about running it low in here and going like almost just kind of in line with the lower skid tube, but it wasn't making sense. So our functionality now, like of having these guys right here, is going to be great. And then obviously we have a foam element cover that goes on here for the dirt. And we also have like an outerwear style condom for this thing for the sand. So that'll go on before Glamis. But there's just there's a lot of good you know, pieces to this thing. This Colin did all by himself. Pretty cool. He jammed on that thing on a Sunday. I wasn't here. We started on it on a Sunday, and he finished it on a Sunday. And I came in and very impressive for him. So it's just, again, it's beautiful to see the progression, but it's a vibe now, and it really complements the front of the truck. So one of the other things to note with that is the whole keeping in mind that this is going to be truggy form, right? So being able to run with the cab off, taking the substructures off where these tube connectors are. So the whole grille and headlight housing and this whole structure comes out, and then the radiator stays. So once it's like that, there's going to be kind of a, do it then, kind of a cool look with this thing. It's got something with the intakes, and then, you know, even the way like the exhaust comes out, there's something going on here that feels good. IMO. So rear detail, there's fuel tank is done, right? So there's some error here in design. Put like an index in there, like the stiffener. And I think if you watch the previous videos, these guys under here is like a slot that's a vertical baffle wall. And you know, welding that, I just kept getting cracks. Welding this surface to the wall, sanded it full pin, dug it out, and just kept getting cracks and cracks and cracks. And so I got it to a point where it's not cracking, but it still makes me nervous about like the seal. So these are kind of just caps to ensure that this thing's completely sealed, but the tank's completely welded. It's got a fill or a drain on the bottom here. It's installed. Obviously there's a fuel filler here that kind of stays correct with the whole rear of this thing. You know, and the front, all this smaller tube, all the small chromoly tube like that, the 3/4 and the 1-inch tie-in is something about that is a really good kind of design language with this truck. So now you can see, we're not at the Off-Road Expo, so you can kind of see the bedside supports. Wish we had some light under it. Let me see. So you can see there's tubular bedside supports. These are removable. It's always important to me to make the bedside supports removable. The worst thing to do is to have like antlers just coming off the truck that, you know, live there, and you can't take them off if you're not running bedsides, or if you swipe something, like it makes sense for these to be removable. So these tube connectors are always the way to go. For us, sometimes you can sleeve them in too, but this just made more sense. And we get some structural design cues in here as well. And that's tied right into the fuel fill as well. So just simple. When the tires are in here, there's it's kind of a nice little medley of things going on, and everything fits proper. The other thing we didn't see at Off-Road Expo was these, the hook, the hold downs, and the standoff for the tire. So it's kind of linked in a way where it can't go anywhere when that Y-strap's on there. But these are like our custom hooks that we make. I always like to get like a little bit of a win on that instead of using like a eyelet, like a cut-off eyelet or a big machined eyelet. Like, you can get some good style points like that with something like that. And then obviously there's another standoff for the top of the bed. The one other thing we didn't see as well was the detail on the bedside mounts. So these are bolt-on units. They're all symmetrical. They're just in different orientation to favor the bedside and the shapes, you know, the directional change. But there's 8 of these guys, and they come off. So, you know, if the next cab, if or when this thing rolls, you get to just take these bad boys off and place them on your next one. is kind of overwhelming. With this thing, it's such a like in the throes, torn apart, blown apart thing. It's kind of hard to, I don't have like a presentation right now of something. It's just like, it's in process. So kind of covering what's here and where we're at with it is my best bet, but it's not something that I can like dive into just so many different features because it's like, it's all blown apart. One of the things from last time was getting like the light bar finalized, or like the rear wing or flat bill or whatever you want to call that thing. So this thing's like solid now. No more Clecos. The rivet program that we're gonna do on this, like, so what this looks like is bring it testing to Barstow with Keith, then it can go with Eric, go to Glamis, or Imperial Sand Dunes, however you want to play that. It'll go there, just raw dog. I told Eric, as far as like paint and stuff, just don't worry about it, let it rust or whatever. It's not a big deal because once it comes back, it'll get blown apart. Everything will get painted and powder coated. RPI's on board with us now, or we're on board with them, or whatever you want to call it, but this is a big deal. So this whole truck is kitted with aircraft certified 12 points that'll go all throughout, all the landing gear, all the important stuff. It's not gonna be like full kill or like, everywhere. Just all the stuff that kind of moves and makes sense will be locked and loaded with this stuff. But for now, we're just gonna kind of load everything like just with like the old bolts that it had, unless it's for like the pivots and things, then we'll put newer stuff in there. But again, I don't want to just have to be taking this stuff on and off unless we need it, and I'd rather final it with this stuff. It's still going to be safe just like it was. This just ensures the best. So we'll get into RPI, Reed Products Incorporated, a little later. We got something up our sleeves with that. No pun intended, y'all me. Oh, sick one, dude. The back window is finished. Mike's gonna come with Iconic Auto Glass and install the windshield, but that's gonna be the Thursday before it leaves. We'll go test with it. When we test next week, it'll just be bare bones. So doors and cab on, windshield out, back windows out, no glass, no hood, no grill, that kind of thing. We don't need any of that for the weight. That's also something to get into. You can kind of see, I was just gonna point this out. We're just gonna jump around. The fuel filler's done. It looks super bonered out, but it's not when the tires are in here, and the tires live here, so it's okay. Also, pay attention to the miter instead of a bend, just like everything else. It kind of has a flow. I also thought Eric mentioned to me about running like a number plate thing. Now I go, and of course I'll take deep dives into stuff for stuff looking cool, but with that I'm like, dude, are you gonna race it? What are you doing with a number plate? Like, you need a number plate? Why? What are you doing? He's like, oh, it would be cool, blah, blah. And I'm like, and so best thing I can do is make something to my abilities that will pass. And I think what we'll do is we'll get like this dorsal hit where I'll have a panel here. There's like a cover panel, a vented cover panel here. The pickup, return, and breather for the fuel all kind of run into this little opening. But there's a good plane here with this where I think I can build off this, and I can put like one single number plate right here that'll follow, and it'll tie in from here over, and it'll have like a proper shape. And if he wants to run like some old, the font that he'll probably have on here, again, just let him have fun, okay? I know, it's not a race truck, it's not racing, okay? Let him have fun. It'll race Nora. I said what I said. But like it would be cool to have that OG like speedway style like motorcycle font, like number plate kind of thing on there, just to be consistent with all the font and like the 70s vibe. So that's one thing. Just like even looking around, there's going to be 2 days of welding on this thing, so that's kind of in the books. Everybody's got jobs, and like, again with Alex, he's been under here plumbing. So like breather line, the breather for the housing is soft line going up to hard line on the link, going back onto soft line with a, like a filter at the end. And then, you know, everything we can get, like stainless hardline, we're doing stainless hardline. So obviously, like your typical is going to be like your axle hardlines, hardline up the link, and then also the fuel lines are all going to be 1/2-inch hardline. So not just the actual fuel, but the return. And then the thing to see over here too is the pumps. So we have 2 big ass Aeromotive pumps in here, and then they'll Y, and there'll be a pre-filter and then an after filter, fuel filters kind of in line. So what we'll do is we'll have a single coming from the tank, and that'll Y into the pumps, and then out of this thing we'll run 2 lines and 2 filters. So like if one of these pumps shits the bed, it shits the bed into its own redundant filter after, and then you just switch off and you switch on to the new one. So you're not like, if something throws guts in here or whatever, you're just not compromising your fuel filter too and having to go in there and change that. It just makes sense like that. So that stuff's all going. One of the things we need to finalize too is like some of the cyclones. I didn't think we were going to put so many. I ordered 35 from KC. They didn't bat an eye, and there's like I think we made like 20 tabs, and I was like, we're going to be good. I don't need more than that, and we need more than that. So everything's here. A couple things with Tanner that I want to address and like identify, and they're not like, again, this is kind of first time for the harness too, right? So we have the building thing down pretty good, but there's more to this, and that's why like we can go back. Like I'm not some big turnkey gnarly shop. Like we're still learning stuff. There's still like a lot of story to be had here. So like even with the wiring, kind of knowing what you want specifics, I always tell guys, like I'm like always with different stuff, you know, whether it's like the merch or even the editing with Joey, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what I want until I see something that I don't, you know, like I will, if you give me one thing, I'll be able to like, no, it's not that way. I gotta have it like that. And some of that with the wiring, same thing, you know, like going with, there's like a harness wire that goes out to the tail light here that kind of runs on this outrigger because it goes to this light, and it's almost like this should go behind the panel, and then this plug needs to be like right here at the tube connector. So then if you take this stuff off, like say you're just ripping around either in truggy form or no bedsides, like you don't need any of this here. So you don't want to have like a dangly chilling, and you don't want to like remove the panel and then let a foot of that just chill in there. So there's like little things like that that we can kind of work with. There's some excess on some of the cyclones, and that's just like, that's also Tanner, like just getting shit done in a timely fashion. And you know, I think not being fully buttoned up on both of our ends, not a big deal. These are all just kind of just things to think about. So this stuff will all be finalized. Everything will be welded. Like we're gonna have this gnarly running and driving machine. It's just not gonna have all the beautification stuff. Like there's panels I need to have here that we talked about. There's some interior like sealing panels, not sealing like that, but like seal, like S-E-A-L, to close in some of this stuff. But all the meat and potato stuff will be done. Bear with me when I show you these innards, because not everything's complete. So like, check it out. So there's some tie-ins. I'm going under. Whoa. Woohoo, it's spooky under here. But what we want to show, so this is the passenger side. This is the C-pillar. This is the end of the cab. Now we didn't do a lot to like, you know, remove the spot welds and remove all this. This is kind of this just old and crusty. And that's what that was the original intention. It wasn't to like make this thing completely beautiful and brand new paint and all that. So like making this cab a consumable item where it can come on and off was extremely important. But also retaining the rigidity without having to like add. We didn't want to like be welding to this thing and making it where there's so much time into the cab. If we had to replace it, like we're shitting the bed on, you know, having to do more work to it or custom work. So like all of these pickup points, and this is the one I'm going to talk about right now, but like all these pickup points are specifically to just kind of bolt, like to almost like come out and just be ready to receive the cab. Man, that sounded, So you can see here what this is a tube connected standoff situation here. When the coilover is in here, it makes more sense as to like why this is inboard and it's not going right to the middle. But you can see like the coilover pivot on the trailing arm here it's, you know, a certain distance from here, because when the trailing arm droops out, it swings the coil closer to this area. So we rode the line of like how close we can get. But you can see like this plate is broke, and it also grabs a bunch of surface. So it's got through bolts, no nut certs or anything. And you go in from this side and you can grab them from the top here, which is a normal opening. And then this pinch seam, which is really the strongest part of the whole cab. This lower pinch where there's like 3 or 4 layers sometimes all pinched together and spot welded and glued, is picked up on. And then it's 1-inch tube with tube connectors. So this actually comes off. So then truggy form again, we're able to just take this off and you just have these little nubs. So that's one thing that's being worked on. You can kind of see the hard line too going on here. So all proper stuff, all Brown and Miller stuff. And then we have our saddles, our little machine saddles that accept hose clamps. So there's actually a groove in here, and I know it's hard to see because it's not lit really well, but you can almost see here that this hose clamp is flush because it's machined in there. The saddle's machined to hold the hose clamp so it doesn't slip off. And it's, you know, we're not the first people to do that stuff, but it's a really nice detail, especially when there's heat shrink on there. You can see Evan Weller, 10-inch in here. AJ, I think, is probably the greatest gear builder in the history of off-road. So gear works, you know, case, all nice running gear in there, jumbo 36 axles, all this stuff's going to be installed. We've talked about all the axle stuff. I'll go over the brake line stuff on the one side right now. Design plays a role in hardline stuff. And you know, that's the one thing is like if you send a car out to get plumbing done or hard lines done, you have to make sure that that person is going to complement the chassis in the car with that stuff, because it is a detail that matters and it's a detail that shows. So putting thought into how we're going to route some of the line here and how that stuff works with the rest of the components on here is a thing. And that's kind of why there's like been some like ulterior lines here as far as what we're going to run, but this is just kind of roughed in and it's still chilling. And that stuff's all just generally bent and set up, and then, or you know, yeah, bent and set up, and then it's symmetrical, so everything hits right, and it's going to be like that throughout the car, because you're going to have hard lines going through this whole thing in a certain way where it, you know, it clears everything and everything works with each other. You can really get an understanding for the complexity of the chassis here and just all the components, you know, all the wiring, all the plumbing, just there's a lot going on. And a lot of it's still like a lesson, because you can build a really streamlined chassis, and if you don't have provisions for where the wiring's going to go and harness is going to go and the plumbing's going to go, then it, you know, it gets tricky. And I think we're learning some of that even with this. It's just like think even more forward than just building like a really beautiful chassis that's functionally sound and it looks good, but also think about how you can, all these systems are going to be laced into there too, you know, instead of just being spaghetti everywhere. Rowdy stuff in here. So it feels ugly. You can see this is kind of where we have a blue tape fella here. That's where Tanner's kind of giving us some notes. You can obviously see some of the big plugs we're using here that separate certain areas of the chassis. You can see some of the rough plumbing going on right now. So you guys are really getting like a behind the scenes, if you will, of just right in the process of getting this thing going. And then what this looks like is 3 people on this thing full time every single day for 10 to 12 hours a day. These things take an incredible amount of time to put together. Fabrication takes a long time, absolutely. Assembling a vehicle to turn into a running, driving vehicle, whole another monster. So it's an exciting process, and it's something, again, like I touched on, more, repetition is the father of learning, and learning how to do this stuff efficiently and quickly, it just comes with repetition and seat time and mileage. Let's hop in for a second. So one of the things I wanted to show you was the harness bar for the driver and the passenger. 1 inch, mitered, bent. This is just tailored specifically to like where the harnesses need to be. But you can see like the shape here is kind of minimal, and that's all you need. It's solid. You don't need like extensive tie-ins. You have to really think about like the force, how this thing's pulling, and some kind of a horrifying style crash, and what that's gonna load and the load path and the pull path on the thing. So I always believe like it's very important for me to have all the shoulder straps be on like a belt, like a loop system into the chassis. No hooks for shoulders. I've seen things like that where there's been failures, and I just, for my own preference, just always, every vehicle we build will always have a loop through style to the chassis for the shoulders. So you can see the trough back here is kind of exposed. We got dangly lights, just big raw dog stuff. You can see the coil packs on their own brackets in here. You can see some of the rust that's taken place, some of the cleaned areas. But just a really good kind of intermittent understanding of this thing being blown apart right now. More details here. Like I think I'd love to, so paint or powder coat on this chassis, we're gonna strip the engine and the trans out of here and just completely degrease everything. We started degreasing a lot of the engine, a lot of mineral spirits, and just kind of blasting it with air and wiping it, but we need something more. Like you can see the trans is crusty. So once all this gets tidied up, we'll get it going for Glamis and for testing, and then blow it apart, and we'll be able to work the bugs out. Now, there's some people that do that with like testing where they're like, oh, don't paint it or do anything, like make sure it's all good. And I get that to an extent, but like, what does that look like if it's not all good? Are you gonna cut huge parts of the chassis out? Like, it should be right. A lot of the big stuff should be right the first time. Header stuff is being welded. Like obviously we had to adapt, just like we talked about in the previous episodes, adapting some of the headers and the direction and the routing there, but retaining the links that we needed for the tri-Y. This is built by Jeremiah down in Marietta, and he does like all like the gnarly Vipers and like 2,500 horsepower street cars and Proline motors and all the shit. So I always follow his lead on advice with this, because there is science to building power out of headers and exhaust systems. Another thing to note too, so some of the new exhaust we did is done, but like you can see there's O2 sensor holes that are on both sides. There's a special recipe for where those need to go too, and also like the orientation of them. So thank you, Jeremiah, for the tips. Having those people where they're just a phone call away and they pick up and they help you, that's a huge thing. And I do that because I'm not an expert at everything. Like, I'm good at things, and I know the things that I'm good at, and even with those I'll still ask for help. But not being afraid to just pick up the phone and get some information is always the more efficient way for me. I'd rather just someone that is a complete professional at what they do, just call them up and get the info, and that's that. And I do the same with other people. So kind of back to the front, you can see there's some mock-up stuff going on here. The original outlet for the radiator is right there. When this upper arm compresses, packaging is so tight that you would crash into the outlet down there when this thing's going up and down. So we'll be putting the outlet on the outside of this thing, and kind of just a custom way that makes sense. Obviously this is just mock-up, it's not going to be ugly and blue like that, but running the water lines is kind of Colin's next thing. And then we'll obviously have like a fill, like a inline radiator cap filler, and also the overflow will be over here. So this is the power steering tank, and then we'll have an overflow in that same little area. So some of the plumbing obviously is incomplete on the brakes. All this stuff is just in transit right now. There's the loud pipes. So that's your side exit exhaust. Let me get you some scale here. I always do this so you can see the scale. So that's my Sharpie. Stop wobbling around, man. So you can see the 3.5, and then it expands to 4, and then it's got that really unique exit that we have here. You can see that exit is really just a product of the bends. So that one bend coming in here, and then going out, adjacent bends, and then just a straight slice gives us that old school footprint, like a male dress shoe from the 30s or something. Uh-oh, can't unsee that one. But anyways, we're gonna, we kind of polish all this stuff out before we weld it. Might even weld it, if you remember, like the big blue ox, might even just weld it and then polish it out again so it doesn't leave those heat marks that get all blackened. They look cool when they're fresh, and then when you put a lot of heat into them, they turn into zebra stripes. So I just wanted to kind of showcase these to you guys too. Those will go back into their home in the car and continue making noise. Also, other thing that's exciting is what this thing's gonna sound like. It did have small bullet mufflers on there before, and it dumped kind of around the C-pillar under the car. So seeing what this thing's gonna crackle off to be will be pretty cool. Time management feels good right now. The final, it seems to me like just that final putting things together is always the digger. We want to have this thing like systems. We'll get everything crimped tomorrow as far as all the lines and all the adapters and everything. And then Colin wants to just get the electronics and the system going right off the bat and start it tomorrow. Tomorrow being Friday. You guys will see this on Monday. So we're pretty current on this thing. Some of these we have backlogged on episodes, and then some of these were like current and we're in the mix. When we try to have them like that. So with that, we want to try to do a systems test tomorrow, just in case there's like some kind of sensor that's bad, or anything where we need to like diagnose. And if we have some time to diagnose instead of the night before, then we're not going bed shitting 101. So I have stuff to do. Everybody's got some things to do. We're gonna work through the weekend. And like for myself, I keep pointing over here because one of my big ticket things is there's no seal. Like if you had the windshield on here, it's just wide open. If you looked over the dash before the windshield cowl starts inside the cab, it's just straight engine and like elements and all that stuff. So I need to build a complete panel that goes across there, seals everything up, like seals. But at least it's not just full blast. I also think too, like in the morning, if that doesn't have some kind of a cover there from the engine, it's gonna be like fog city. I don't care how much Rain-X is on there, it's gonna not work. So seal that thing off, and then also there needs to be a standoff for this sheet metal because we have some just rigged out pieces in here that are like hidden in here that are just literally just like 2 pieces of plate off the chassis to hold the wiper cowl where it's supposed to go. But we really need something that's removable, that's like a bigger, more structural permanent piece. So that's one I have to bite off. Let's gonna close this, but let's talk about a couple things inside. Ready? Yep. So one of the other things too that we have like with the Frontier, we end up doing it with everything, is dead pedals. Dead pedals meaning like, well, I mean a dead pedal, right? But just having like a secondary form of like somewhere to plant your foot for safety, where like it, you know, it's so beneficial driving a car and riding in a car when you can brace your feet. Like these things are doing constant impact, and if you've ever ridden in one, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, especially going fast or going through big choppy stuff. And same driving, you know, if your feet are just kind of moving around, it's just not the same. Like you get something real good by grounding yourself and being able to plant your feet on something. So we've done really kind of traditional style dead pedals where it's like a dimple die or a flared hole that's just backwards, so the flare kicks up, so it adds grip to your foot. You can see, well, that's not a good reference, but we'll add one in here that'll be more slim for Eric for his left foot, and then the passenger will get like a big wide box. And that whole front firewall, like I designed it specifically knowing that we were going to get that next angle to really comfort your feet. And then the third seat guy also gets one in the middle too. So it's going to like tie all this stuff together really well. And it always adds like a really good touch aesthetically as well. So you can see like there's flared holes on the shifter. Some people call them dimple dies, but that's actually just the die. It's a flared hole. That's what you're doing. So instead of the flare going in, the flare would be coming out, and that's what we're going to have there. So those would be cool to see. And then we're just going to put this whole thing back together. The harness bars are done. There's some tie-ins that are kind of tricky to see, but we have tie-ins going on this portion of the roof too, and grabbing like a really good seam up there. And then what we've done is we've also stepped up all the hole sizes to 3/16. So we're going to use rivets. Rivets will grab like the A-pillar area below the belt line to the rocker. That's all going to be 3/16 rivet. The upper portion here will all be 3/16 rivet. And then down here on the rocker is 5/16 hardware every 8 inches. That's right on that pinch that we talked about earlier. And then same, you know, grabbing this portion right here. It's all solid with the tube connectors and those 4 locations, grabbing part of the pinch and part of the interior of the sheet metal. So that, like in itself, is enough. I think we probably just want to get something like along the back, just for obvious reasons. And then what needs to happen, the exhaust is getting welded. I want to show you guys the exhaust. So I keep remembering things, okay? Even with a list, I still get sketchy. So exhaust is being welded right now, or at least prepped for welding. That goes back in, and then we need to have like, there's some covers, kind of like if you looked in right like at the opening the door in the sill, you'd see like the exhaust right there running. So I at least would like to get it covered along the chassis. So exhaust goes through here, and then it kicks up right before the lower trailing arm bolt, or the front trailing arm bolt. It kicks up and it almost runs along this tube just for a small amount, and then goes out of the beaver hole here. So I want to just continue our sheet metal program and just close this area off. And I don't even care about this one. Like if this is open and that's open, just for the Imperial Sand Dune outing, that's fine. Once it comes back, we'll talk about like where we're at with all the finish work on this thing. So I think that's it for right now. Covered enough, got enough going on. We should have this thing, like I'm anticipating breaking in the diff and having all the drive shaft and everything done. JE Reel is going to do the drive shafts, having that stuff all done Tuesday, and then we go out testing Wednesday. So if you guys are watching this on Monday, know that we're thrashing, and we should be good for Tuesday, like just systems test, and then bright and early Barstow Wednesday. The other thing too, like talking about the drive shaft, 5/8 of an inch of plunge all the way through the cycle. So super happy about that. Dude, the ADHD is kicking. So that, and then also we weighed this thing. The goal, I have scales, corner scales for this thing. So we're at 56% right now, rear weight bias. Keith likes to have a 60% rear, 40% front. There was 20 gallons missing out of the tank when we weighed it, so that's 120 more pounds in the rear. So I think we're going to be just about perfect 60-40. Super impressive, 5,700 pounds. So we're in a good spot, under 6K. You could put, you know, 2 medium-sized people in here and you'd still be right at 6K. So that's cool. I think this truck was 63 when we had it, when it had way less chassis and it was longer and it had the stock sheet metal and, you know, 470 pounds of Line-X. So I think we're in a good spot. I can't wait to see what it does. It's gonna go fast, and I hope Eric just kind of, he knows this is his baby now, and I think that it'll be treated like that in a way where he's gonna learn. And you know, again, worst case scenario, it rolls. It's a cab. It sucks because it's a beautiful old 70s cab, but at the same time, it's built to come off and it's built to have a new one go back on with ease. So I hope you guys are having a good Monday. Thanks for tuning back in. We should be a little more consistent now, so expect some stuff. Tell me to do more Fab Diaries, give me some motivation, and I'll get that stuff going.